Hey, my name is Kelsey Powell, and this is my legal case study presentation. My presentation is on one of the most common legal issues that we have today, and that's called malpractice. In our text, Master states that malpractice is considered the professional negligence, and negligence is defined as the failure to act as a reasonably prudent person who would have acted in a specific situation. So basically, negligence is when you don't do something that you should have done or you do something that should not have been done. In malpractice, there's many different examples that I can use, but today I'm going to talk about wrong medication administration. And I have an example from my job. It happened probably just a couple months ago. One of my coworkers, she had a very sick patient that came back from the OR. This patient had coded while in surgery, and then when they were able to get the patient back and stable enough to come to the ICU, they brought them over. So the patient was still crashing pretty much when they got to us. They weren't actively coding, but the physician ordered an epi drip. So the nurse gets on the MAR and she messages pharmacy. I think she even called pharmacy and let them know, hey, we need an Epidrip stat. So they were able to send it. And then um, she hung the medication like normal. The only issue was during surgery, they had cut the patient's wristband off in order to place an arterial line. And for some reason, it got missed and a, a bracelet was never put back on the patient. So, since the patient's blood pressure was dropping, the nurse decided to go ahead and hang the medication while waiting on a new bracelet to come up. So, although this isn't protocol, she was just trying to save her patient, and she hung the epi, well, what she thought was the epi, and a couple minutes later, she realized that the patient's blood pressure wasn't going up, it was dropping. So she, you know, re zeroed her art line and checked the patient, made sure everything was okay, and then she realized that she hung the wrong medication. Pharmacy had sent her Cardine and not epinephrine. And for some reason, I'm not sure what the confusion was because the patient didn't even have Cardine on their MAR. Thankfully, the patient was not hurt and the mistake was caught very quickly. The nurse was at the bedside the whole time. There was even a physician at bedside the whole time, too. But this was still really serious. And um, she had told me a few days ago when I asked her, to tell me the whole story. She said that she didn't get in trouble for this situation, but she did have to attend a few meetings that included everyone that was there, everyone involved, and then people higher up in the hospital. That way they could make changes and this wouldn't happen anymore. The conclusion that they came to was pharmacy. I mean, they didn't blame everything on pharmacy, but pharmacy now sends high alert medications with bright stickers that say high alert, and they also have the drug name on them too. And they do this with every drip that is a high alert med. That way, it'll catch the nurse's attention and serve as a reminder to always double check the medication before administering. And although protocol was not followed because the patient did not have a bracelet on, thankfully they weren't harmed. But if they were, and this case was a little more serious, if the patient would have, coded again, family could have sued and said that this was malpractice because the wrong medication was administered. So now I like to discuss a few different factors that play into malpractice. I found a great article on AmericanNurseToday.com that goes over all of the factors that play into medication administration errors. And these factors include role fatigue, cluttered environment, increased patient acuity, distractions, interruptions, and increased workload. So, in the example that I used, I think the biggest factor would be increased patient acuity. When you have an acutely ill patient, it is very easy to miss certain things that you wouldn't normally miss if your patient wasn't as sick. But it's still important to go behind yourself and double check everything. So, also in this article, it discusses how to avoid medication errors. Um, we all learned the 5 rights of medication administration in our associates classes, and that is patient, drug, dosage, time, and route. Always make sure you check those every single time you give a med. You also want to have proper communication. In the example that I used, she communicated with pharmacy, but maybe pharmacy misunderstood, what she was asking for. So you have to make sure you have proper communication. Always ensure that the medication is clearly labeled and always double check. If this would have been done, there would not have been an error at all. So that's important. Also, always scan your medications through the MAR and have special packaging for high alert medications, which is what the solution was at the end. Although the nurse was not accused of malpractice, this could have easily happened had the patient been harmed. And if this were the case, the Alabama Board of Nursing would have been involved. The nurse would have had to go to court, and she could have easily lost her license. I got on the Alabama Board of Nursing website just to read over the current laws on nursing and losing your license. And basically, what I gathered from it is if someone complains about you, writes a written complaint, so in that case would be if the family decided to sue, they take all of those seriously and they have to follow through with them. If the nurse would have had to go to court and fight against this malpractice accusation and she was found guilty, the Alabama Board of Nursing website states if the accused person is found guilty of the charge, the board may refuse to issue a license, may revoke or suspend a license, or may otherwise discipline a licensee. A revoked license may be considered for reinstatement after 1 year in accordance with board rules. The board thoroughly reviews the situation and decides, the outcome for the nurse, the discipline in which the nurse should receive. Although the hospital's insurance would more than likely cover any obstacles that the nurse may run into in a malpractice case, it's always a good idea for the nurse to have their own malpractice insurance. And I was reading through the textbook, and it states that many nurses have their own malpractice insurance to avoid the risk of losing their own personal assets. I decided to dig a little deeper into personal malpractice insurance because I really don't know very much about it. I mean, I remember learning bits and pieces in nursing school, but no one really taught me the details of it. So I found an article on American Nurse Today, again, the same website that I used earlier. It's a great website. Um, and I just kind of read through about the facts of malpractice insurance. And basically, it states that sure, your hospital or your employer has malpractice insurance that will cover most costs, but in some cases, you know, there's a gap. If you're relying on your employer's insurance and there's a gap, then you're responsible for paying that extra money. And it also states that if you don't have your own malpractice insurance, then you really don't have a choice as to who your lawyer is. You basically get whoever your employer gives you. If you don't have your own malpractice insurance and you're interested in going to volunteer as a nurse, maybe on a mission trip or somewhere, or you do any other type of nursing services outside of your full-time job, you could get in serious trouble and have to pay a lot of money if something were to happen. So it's very important that you consider getting malpractice insurance. Unfortunately, in today's society, it's very easy for someone to sue another person, and I believe in the cases of malpractice that there should be very strict regulations as to how far the malpractice accusation goes. Although I do believe that every written accusation should be taken seriously like it is, there are some cases that are far worse than others, and I believe those should be the sole focus of the Alabama Board of Nursing as far as revoking license goes. You know, it's very easy as nurses for us to make small mistakes, and I don't believe that we should be punished for those as far as, you know, taking our license away. Now, if a patient was harmed very severely, then yes, I do believe that your license should be revoked because we have a responsibility to take care of these people and save their lives. And we have to be very, very careful and pay attention to every little thing that we do. So, this concludes my legal case study presentation. I hope you guys enjoy, and War Eagle.